Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Annie. If you're new here, I am a professional artist. I've been painting for 10 years. I run a small business from my home where I sell my original paintings, and I also work in art licensing, kind of dabble in a whole bunch of different things in this art world. So if that's your thing and you like learning how to paint and you like flowers and you're into that kind of thing, like this video and hit the subscribe button. And it would mean the world to me. Anyway, if you're not new here, welcome back, and thanks again for tuning in for another painting tutorial. So today's video, as you saw already, I assume you read the title and thumbnail because that's what brought you here. But today we're gonna be painting this from my sketchbook. This is the whole spread that I did, but today we're gonna be painting this one specifically. I would say that this tutorial is maybe a little bit more of an intermediate tutorial. I do my best to break it down so that even the most beginners can paint, but if you feel like you have no artistic ability and you have a hard time following along, know that that's okay, because this might be a little bit more of an advanced tutorial for you, and that's okay. If you could paint this the way that I can paint it, then you wouldn't be watching the tutorial now, would you? So if it does not look exactly the way I have painted, that's okay, because it's not supposed to look exactly like mine. It's supposed to look like your own painting. This is a just for fun tutorial. It is a sit back, kick back, relax, grab a cup of coffee kind of tutorial, just to enjoy a quiet afternoon of painting, to get you inspired. Yeah, and so that's what this is for. I wanted to say there are a few parts in the video where it gets a little blurry because my camera did not focus correctly, and I left them in because I felt like it wasn't that bad, but just know I'm aware and I apologize, but it's just a few spots that are a little blurry, so hopefully you can look past that. Another thing, as always with my previous tutorials, I do like to include a sketch for you as a little freebie resource to help you start your painting. It's just like a line drawing that you can, so I'll include, it's a line drawing of this so that you have something to begin with, because you'll see with my tutorials, I don't start with a sketch prior to painting, especially when I'm working in my sketchbook. So because of that, I have included a line drawing for you if you feel like that will help you guide you along a little bit easier. So you can get that there's a link to where you can get that in the description below. So I think that covers everything. Enjoy. Don't be too hard on yourself. This is supposed to be fun, and I hope you have so much fun. So let's get into the video. We won't be using a ton of supplies for this painting, but we just need our paint palette, a glass of water, a rag, and golden fluid acrylics, pyro orange, titanium white. We use a lot of white, so I go for the bigger one there. Cobalt blue. The next one is quinacridone magenta. And we have permanent green light. And the next color we have is permanent violet dark, and I don't use a ton of that one, so you don't need the big tube. And then we have yellow, and I don't know how to say that one, but I'll leave it in the description below so you can check that out. Super important is the matte medium. I use this in all my paintings. This is Golden Retarder. I also use Liquitex matte medium. I love it. Helps slow dry time and helps with blending when you're using acrylic paints. It's amazing. I love it. For brushes, we're using 2 flat angled brushes, 2 size filbert brushes. I'll leave the sizes in the description below. This is the sketchbook that I'm using today. You can use any canvas paper, but this is what I'm using. I love this sketchbook. The pages are super thick, which is really nice when you're using acrylic paints, because obviously it's a thicker paint, so you want really heavy duty pages. These pages are really great because it holds the paint really well. They don't buckle, and you can paint front and back, which you can see I paint front and back, which I love that about the sketchbook, and it's been really great. I'm setting up my space here. I always clip down my pages just with some small clips just to keep the pages down, and they don't like pop up. a ton, but it is nice just not to have to worry about keeping the pages down. And these are just really small clips that I use, and I just use a couple of them to keep the pages down. And then we're going to start with the base coat here, and I was going for like a light green. So I'm using my green and pyrrole orange with light and matte medium. You're going to mix your green with a tiny bit of pyrrole orange, a lot of white, until you get it to the green that you like. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but you can go lighter if you want to go lighter. You can go darker if you want to go darker. Mix that matte medium in there, and it'll help move the paint on your paper much more smoothly. Now we're going to put the rest of the colors on our palette. So I have cobalt blue, quinacridone magenta, purple, white, yellow. I have some green gold on there too. I don't think I used the green gold in this painting much though, so disregard that. We're going to start by using our larger filbert brush. So grab that. And the first thing we're going to do here is paint the centers of our peonies. So that's what we're doing first, and we're going to mix up that mustard yellow. So to make that mustard yellow, we're going to start with yellow and a teeny tiny bit of purple, and then add yellow until you get that nice vibrant mustard color. And you can follow what I'm doing here so that you know where to place the centers of your peonies, or you can follow along with the sketch that you're using. But this is just a rough placement of the color. This is for the center of our flowers, the 2 peonies, and then the center of the zinnias that are going to be in the corner here. Now we're going to move on to the rest of the flower. To mix that color, we're going to add a little bit of white into the color that we were already using, add some quinacridone magenta to make it a little more peachy pink, and add some yellow, and I'm going to add matte medium in there too, because that'll help keep the paint wet for longer. And we're going to take our filbert brush here and use quick, short, intentional brush strokes to create the shapes of the peony petals and work our way around the center, just like I'm doing here. This is a really great brush to use when you're painting flowers, this filbert brush, because you can see as I'm working around the flower, it creates the perfect petal shape, and it's also really versatile too, so you can get different angles and different shapes with this brush. Same idea with quick, short, intentional brush strokes on the second peony flower here. We're doing the same thing, quick, short, intentional brush strokes with our filbert. Using the same brush, I added white to that same color mix, and now I am almost just going over top of the brush strokes that I just made. And the second layer, you still want it to be transparent. So you want it to be lighter than the first layer, and you want it to be light enough so that the second layer is coming through. But what these brush strokes that we're making now are to add definition and dimension and to the petals that we just made to bring out dimension in the flower. What we're doing here, we're just adding highlights and just going in and adding highlights to the tip of each brushstroke that we made, and each brushstroke is a petal. So in life, you know, when you're looking at a flower, the light is going to shine at the tip of the petal, and that's how you want to think of adding your highlights. Where's the light going to be hitting it? It's going to be hitting it at the tip of the petal. So that's what we're doing here, and this is what's going to really bring out the dimension and definition of our peonies. Next, we're going to work on the 2 zinnias that we have in the corners of the sketchbook painting. To mix that color, it's very similar to the peonies, but just slightly different. I'm going to mix up some little bit of purple, tiny bit of yellow, a little bit of quinacridone magenta in there too. And then to tone it down, we're going to use blue, and that'll tone it down without muddying it, and then add white. And you can play around with this color mix so you get it the way that you like. Feel free to experiment, it's super fun. Time to get out your flat angled brush, and just like I did here, we're going to take short, wide brush strokes and work our way around the center of the zinnia in an oval shape, just like I did. And we're going to do the same thing on the bottom flower as well. and to create movement throughout the composition, I'm going to have some going off of the paper. And so we have some on the bottom there, some at the top, and I am going to add one more at the bottom here, again, to create movement throughout the painting. It just helps guide the viewer's eye throughout the painting so it doesn't just stay stuck in the middle. Now I'm going to bring out definition in the Zenia petals, because with Zenias they have a gazillion little itty bitty petals. So I'm going to take a smaller flat angled brush, and one at a time with swooping brush strokes, I'm going to work my way around the Zenia, and we're going to think directional brush strokes. We're going to go down to up. So we're going to work our way towards the center of the flower, if that makes sense. Think directional. So you want the petal to be, you want to paint the brush stroke in the direction that the petal will be going. So the petals are always going towards the center of the flower, and so that's the way that we're going to paint it on our painting. This is one of those spots in the video. There've already been a couple, but this is another one of those spots where it got a little blurry, but I wanted to leave it in so that you could see how I painted the zinnias and get more of a visual of painting those little petals. I'm going to switch over to a smaller filbert brush now, add some white to our color mix that we're using, and add some little details into the petals of our zinnia. Also going to start adding some little details into our peonies as well. If you watch what I'm doing here, they're just short, quick brush strokes. Very short, very quick, not thinking too much about it, kind of just moving along with the direction of the flower, if that makes sense. So with this style of painting, I would say it is more of a loose style of painting, but just because it's a loose style of painting doesn't mean we're going quick and fast with our brush strokes. They are looser brush strokes, and they are done intentionally, one brush stroke at a time. So I know it looks like I'm going really quick here, but I'm being very intentional with the placement of where I'm placing these little details. After finishing the highlights on the peonies, we're going to move into these little purple flowers. These are such a sweet part of the painting. So first we'll mix the color. Mix the color of the purple flowers. We're going to use quinacridone magenta, cobalt blue, and you can play around with this however you want. You can go more blue, you can go more red, whatever you like. I am going to play around here until I get it to the way that I like it. And I'm also, while I'm mixing my color, just like I always do, I'm going to add matte medium in as well, because again, just like with the peonies, I like the first layer of my flowers to be thinner. I like them to be more translucent. I like to build on layers, so that's why we like the first layer to be a little more translucent. For these sweet little filler flowers, we're using our medium filbert brush. They just take a few brush strokes, again, directional brush strokes, just like I talked about a few minutes ago. And if you watch here, you'll see what I mean. I'm working just a few brush strokes at a time and being intentional about the placement. I'm kind of just filling in the composition and where I feel like there are more empty spaces, and keeping in mind that we want to have a good flow to the composition. As I'm working through these purple flowers here, take note of how I'm holding my brush, how I twist, turn, flip my brush, how you hold your brush and the pressure that you're using and the angle that you're holding it at. That technique is one that I think is often overlooked and can really help in the way you paint. So just a little tidbit that you can keep in mind as you're working on your painting. This color here I'm using I'm going to fill in to create more of a shadow in the purple flowers, and I used blue and purple and matte medium as well, and just dropping quick little brush strokes, 2 or 3, that's it, not overthinking it, just putting a quick little brush stroke in the center of the flowers here. As you go through this video, something that you can do if you are feeling like you're having a hard time with this technique of the movement of the petals, you can get a scrap piece of paper and practice this brush stroke on the paper before you go on your painting, because sometimes you just need a little bit of extra practice and you'll be surprised. Sometimes you just need a little extra practice and then it'll click. So pause the video and practice if you need to, and then go back to your painting. Or if you're like, Annie, I totally got it, you can totally fast forward through this part. So now we have 2 layers on our flowers, and I lightened that color mix with a little bit of white and added a little more blue, and we're adding highlights. So just like we did with the peonies, this is just building up on our layers to create definition in the flowers. I'm going to work around each individual flower, rotating my brush, creating different shapes and brush strokes to create those highlights on the flowers. And a quick tip with color mixing, as you lighten the color mixes on your palette, adding white can tend to dull down the vibrancy of the color that you're using. So if you want to bring back the vibrancy a little bit, you can always add a touch of magenta or a touch of blue, and that will bring back a little bit of vibrancy back into the highlights that you're using. Because like I said, and you'll see if you're painting with me in real time, when you're adding white as you work on your palette, it does tend to dull down the color a little bit. And if you want to go real bright, really bright with your highlights, you can add with titanium white, add a touch, like I'm talking like hardly any yellow into a white, and that'll add a really bright highlight. But I didn't do that here. I just kept adding white to the original mix that I was using for these purple flowers, and if I wanted to bring back a little vibrancy, I just added a touch of magenta in there, and it was a really nice way to brighten the color for highlights. Next, we're moving on to all of our greenery, which is my favorite part of a painting, because this is when I feel like it all starts to come together. So first we'll mix our colors, and then we'll paint the greens. So I start with mixing our green, a little bit of blue, and I use some pyrrole orange to dull that down a little bit. And you'll have to play around with your colors here till you get it to the green that you like. And when I use orange in my color mixes to dull down the mix, it's a teeny tiny bit, not a lot at all. So sometimes the green is just a little too vibrant, and toning green down with red or orange will dull down the vibrancy, which I do a lot. Just like with the peony petals, when we use the filbert brush works great for the peony petals, but the flat angled brush is a brush I love for making leaves, because it's one of those brushes where when you use it correctly, you can get really organically shaped leaves in one single brush stroke. So if you watch here, the way I'm holding my brush, and the way I'm angling my brush, and the way I'm twisting and turning my brush, I'm getting all sorts of different angles and organically shaped flowing leaves. Having matte medium in your paint on your palette mixed in is also going to help glide the paint on the paper really beautifully, so that you can just glide your brush on the paper and get these really lovely shaped leaves. Just like I said before, the way you hold your brush, the angle that you hold it at, and the way you rotate it on the paper is going to determine how your leaves turn out. So this is another thing where if you want to practice this shape and brush stroke on a scrap piece of paper before you go on to your final piece, you can totally pause this video and do that. And it's so normal and okay if you feel like you need to practice that before going on to the final painting, because this is another one of those techniques where if you've never done it before, you might just need to practice a few times before it clicks. After you paint, use that green to paint the greens all around the composition of the paper. You're just going to paint greens in narrow and long leaves and work your way around the composition. When I'm painting greenery, I kind of use the greenery as a way to fill in the gaps of the composition And then I lighten the color with white and then go over the first layer of leaves to just add a little variety in the values so that it helps the greens pop a little bit more so they don't fall so flat. And next, we're almost done. There's just a few more steps, but next we're going to work on the eucalyptus, which is in the top left and bottom right hand corners of this painting. We're going to use cobalt blue, and I think I put some purple in there with some yellow. You can play around with this color if you want to get it the way that you like it, and lots of matte medium. Before starting eucalyptus, I'm going to use this really dark color to bring in a little more detail to the center of these purple flowers, so you can see how that really starts to define the shape of the flower and adds lots of dimension, which I think is so pretty. And then we are going to get some more paint on there, some more matte medium, lighten that color up a little bit. And in this bottom corner here is where the eucalyptus is going to go. So we start with the stem. We're using the flat angled brush here. You can use the large or the small one. I think this one I am using the smaller flat angled brush. And eucalyptus has rounder leaves, so you can see, take note of how I'm holding my brush and the way I'm using brush strokes to create those round leaves of the eucalyptus. And these leaves are pretty transparent, but I'm also now going to go in and create some leaves in the back to give the illusion that they're in the back. And for those leaves I added even more matte medium so that they kind of fade into the background and they're very transparent. So I added more white, more matte medium, and you can see how the brush strokes here are kind of just creating leaves. Like I said, they're just fading into the background, which I think is really pretty. It gives the whole painting more of an ethereal feel, which I think is really pretty. And then we have eucalyptus leaves in the top left-hand corner of this painting as well. And we're just gonna do the same thing that I did in the bottom right-hand corner. Now for the finishing touches. The very last thing I do in a painting, I add itty bitty, teeny tiny little filler leaves and accents, and then add any little final details. So these little white flowers I added throughout the composition just to add a little something sweet and cute. For these flowers, I used white, just pure white, and I'm using my small filbert brush to create these flowers. And again, I kind of painted them throughout the composition. Wherever your painting's probably going to look a little different than mine, so you can add them wherever you feel like you need to balance anything out, or if you feel like you have an awkward gap somewhere, this is a way to fill in those funny little gaps if you have in your composition. I do it a lot. And then with the small filbert brush, I am also going to go in again, do another round of bringing out small little details, adding little highlights throughout the flowers, the leaves, wherever I feel like I need to bring out a little more dimension if there are areas that are feeling a little flat. And then I also added a final mix of a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white, gonna go into the center of those white flowers there. Gonna add this color into the center of the peonies there. It's just a brighter yellow to bring out the dimension of the center of the peonies, which I think is so lovely. And then I'm gonna go into the zinnia there, in the center of the zinnia, and just kind of work my way around and see what areas of the painting need these final finishing touches. And we're all done. What do you think? Here's a final look at the finished piece. I love it. This is one of my favorites. there you have it. I hope that you loved today's painting tutorial. I hope you had so much fun. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the description below and I will do my very best to answer any questions that you have. So until next time, bye guys.